Hi everyone, this is Bill Hitchcock, and I'm just trying to set up a series of videos here. What we're going to be working on is some things from Chapter 7, which covers some special functions. There's hundreds of functions in Excel, and we want to take you through some of the ones that maybe you might not normally come across, as you would for some things like sum and average and min and max and that sort of thing. So first what I'm going to start out with is some date functions. So I've got a spreadsheet here that you can download, and up at the top I've got just some labels typed in: the start date, the date increment, and then going across we've got just about every kind of date function that you're going to want to work with. And let's start getting to it. So what I want to do first is, for my start date, what I did is I highlighted these 4 cells and clicked on Formulas and Create from Selection, and it used the left column to take the start date and date increment and assign them as range names to cell B1 and B2. So I've already got that done, because if you click on cell B1, you can see up here in the name box I've got the start date for that. So I'm going to type in today's date, so I can do that by either just manually typing in the date. I could, for instance, just type in 3/19/2020, or instead what I'm going to do is I want to use the today function and type in equals today in 2 parentheses, and I get the same date, but that way every time we start up the spreadsheet it'll always use whatever the current date happens to be. For the date increment, that I'm going to use down below here, and I'm going to have some date numbers, say 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. For my date, I'm going to reference, for the first one, the start date, and for the second one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the previous date and add to it this date increment. So if I come up to the date increment, I'm going to try it for 4 days, and down below here you can see that the date, I've got just a couple of numbers here, and I don't want those numbers. Instead, I want that to be formatted as a date. So I'm going to highlight those 2 cells, go to my Home tab, format them with a long date format, and I get a bunch of hash marks so I can widen out the column to see what that looks like. And I can see, really, I don't want to have it with the full date there, so I'm going to use a custom date format. I'll right click on those cells, choose Format Cells, go to Custom, and change this for the type, and I want to delete out that first part and just use DDD, which gives me Thursday, or the day of the week. I don't need the comma, so I'll delete that. Come over to the months. I don't need the entire month name, so I'm just going to do 3 M's, which gives me the 3-character month abbreviation. I like having 2 D's, which gives me the 2 digits for the day. So if it was the 4th of March instead, I would get 04. And then finally I've got the 4 digits for the year. I want to see the entire 2020 here and do that. So I'll hit OK. That shortens up my date. The other thing that I want to do is I want to format all of this so I kind of can maximize what I'm trying to get across on the screen. So I'm going to hit Control Home, hold my Shift key down, cursor down here a ways, and before I do that, I guess maybe I better do this. Control Home, Shift down. I want to go across first to highlight all of these columns that I'm going to be working with, and then I'm going to start going down. And I'm going to put this down, I don't know, maybe to row 95, that'll be plenty. The font type, I want to use Calibri. For the font size, I want to set that to size 8, and that shrinks everything down a little bit nicer. Alright, so I've got that in here. Let's extend my series. So I've got 1, 2, 3 typed in here. I'm going to use a comma format, get rid of the 2 decimal places. And then I'm going to click and drag on my fill handle and drag this all the way down, and let's go Let's go to row 30. That'll be plenty of dates that we can have in here. Hit Control Home. I want to set up freeze panes, so I'm going to go to cell A5, click View, Freeze Panes, and Freeze Panes. I want to check my page layout, choose Print Titles. For the rows to repeat at the top, I'd like to have these first 4 rows, so that way if it goes on for multiple pages, I'll get that. And also for the columns to repeat, because I know this is probably going to be a fairly wide spreadsheet, I want to choose columns A and B to repeat those. So let's try Print Preview. See what this looks like so far. It's churning. I've got 3 pages on it. So if I page through some of those, there you can see how it keeps those columns there. I'm going to change my orientation while I'm in here, change it to landscape. See if I can get away with just 2 pages with using landscape. And sure enough I can. And it looks like my 30 dates will fit on that, so that looks better. Alright, that looks good. Let's save this. Let's widen out some of these columns, adjust some of these columns so I can read what everything's showing up here. For the date one, I probably don't need that quite that wide. And then I'm going to take this formula that I had in here. So the first one was equals, and I point to the start date. The second one was equal to the previous cell plus my date increment. And then I'm going to copy that down. And you can see it's skipping every 4 days. So I get kind of a nice variety of dates in here. If you want to try changing the date increment to 1, you'll see you'll just get, here's Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, etc. If you wanted weeks, you could do 7. Gives you all the Thursdays. But I want 4 because that way it will, as I say, show you kind of different days of the week, and it gives me kind of a random fashion of dates. Right, next for the serial number. I just want to reference these dates, but then I want to format these with a comma format and get rid of that, and I'll copy this down. The reason I do that is if my start date was the first date that Excel uses, January 1st of 1900 is serial number 1. 4 days later, there it is, January 5th. 4 days after that, the 9th, and it's known as day number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. So we'll set this back to today. So today happens to be 43,908 days, I guess, if we subtract 1 from January 1st, 1900. Right, my next function is, these are all functions here. So, first we had kind of formulas that we typed in. All the rest of these that are in capital letters, they're all functions that I'm going to be using. So, we'll try equal days and a parenthesis. And it says, give me an end date and a start date. So my end date is the date that I have here. Type in a comma. The start date will be today, or whatever we have for the start date. Hit enter. I get 0. So it just tells me the difference between today and today is 0 days. If I copy this down, here it's 4 days, 8 days, 12 days, 12 days since March 19th, 2020. 16 days since the same. So it's you can actually get the same number by just subtracting your dates, but there is a day function, and we can try that. Next one, what we have is something called the YEARFRAC function, and it gives us a start date, an end date, and a basis. So we'll use our start date for the start date. We'll use our serial for that. And then the basis is optional, but we want to try out some different bases. Basi. So I'll type in a comma, and I've got options for 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. You can see if we type in 0, we'll get the US format for 360 days for the year fraction and so on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this up as a reference. So I'm going to type in the word basis up here and the number down below here. So, you know, if you want to give it a range name, you could. I'm just going to hit Function F4. So I always use that particular row. Type in a parenthesis, hit enter. So let's type in basis up here, and we'll type in 0. And let's copy this down. And then let's format those, because it carries out to a bunch of decimal places. So let's format it with a comma format. Maybe carry this out to 4 decimal places. So 4 days is just about 1%, a little over 1% of a year. 8 days is about 2% of a year. Might be how you could read that. So if you try changing some of the different basis, there's basis number 1, basis number 2, basis number 3, basis number 4 if you're in Europe, and so on. It counts the days slightly different depending on what it uses for that basis. If it's going to use 360 days a year or 365. So we'll put in 0 for kind of the normal or the default on that one. All right, let's change our date increment. Let's make that 365. And you can see for my year fraction, 1 year later gives me a year fraction of 1, 2 years, 3 years, and now it starts to change slightly because there's leap years involved and so on. So let's change this back to 4, and we're done with that one. All right, next is the day function. So we type in equals day, and use a serial number. The serial number meaning either the number of days since January 1st, or you can reference just a date to do it. So the day is the 19th. Copy that one down. If you like, you can format it with a comma format and get rid of the decimals. You know, that will work just fine. And every single time here, it's just pulling out whatever the day portion of that date happens to be. So for the month, we can do the same thing. Month, my serial number is the date. And we type in equals year of this date. Now I don't want to format the year with a comma format, because then I'll get 2, 020, which looks a little bit odd. You know, I mean, we're used to just doing that. But for the month, I might use the same format as I did for the day. I can highlight both these cells, copy them down, and we've got that done. Right, eDate equals eDate parenthesis. It says we've got a start date and the months. So in this case, my start date, I want to use this date here. And then for the months, we'll do kind of like what we did with the basis. I'm going to reference a cell, and I'll hit Function F4 a couple of times. And I'm going to type in my months up here. And we started with 0. And I've got this serial date format, so I'm going to use either a short date, or I could just use this. Short date looks like this. I'll show you that. Home, general, there's my short date. So if I change the months to 1, it gives me 1 month from now. 1 month from March 19th is April 19th. So let's use this format instead. Widen out this column. Copy this down. Widen it out a bit more so we can read all those. And we're getting 1 month from the leftmost date here. So if you want to find out what it is for a year from them, There you go. You can see the dates are all 2021. If you want to find out what it was 6 months from now, 3 months from now, etc., you put in the number and it does the calculations for you. EO month is similar, but it finds us whatever the end of the month happens to be. So we'll type in equals EO month, end of month. My start date is that beginning date. The months will reference this cell up here, and we can do the same thing. Let's copy in months here. We'll put it here. Let's do a couple things. Let's take these terms and let's just justify them so it kind of lines up a little bit nicer over that. Let's see, for EO month, months I need to put a $sign in there so when I copy it, it references it. And I also want to use this format painter for the end of the month. Let's widen that out. And 1 month from now, it's going to be kind of the end of the month is April 30th. So if we change this one to 0, it just tells us whatever the end of the month is based off of this date. So the end of the month of March is the 31st. Copy that down. So I've got a bunch of March dates here. Then we go into April. We find out what the end of April is for all of these weeks, and so on. All right, that's looking pretty good. For the date function, if you type in equals date, parenthesis, the date function uses a year, so I'm going to go back to my 2020, comma, the month, comma, and the day. So what I can do with that then, sorry, I just had to flip my page. Is, for instance, if I want to copy this, the months, put that here, I'm going to put days up here. And I'll start with 0. And I'm going to change my date function slightly to add in the number of days. Let's put it right at the end here. Plus, I better put it in here. Plus the number of days, and then I want to use function F4 to do that. So if I want to know what it was 5 days from now, we can change that up here. Let's use our format painter again. Widen out this column. Copy this down. And let's see what happens if we try something like 45 days. So there's Sunday, May 3rd is 45 days from the 19th. If I want to know what it is a fortnight from now, 14 days, there we've got it. 1 week is the 26th. If I want to know what it was 7 days prior, we could subtract and do things like that. So, again, if you think a little bit about how you might want to set up some formulas, you can really do a lot of powerful things with our spreadsheet. All right, next we've got equals days 360, parenthesis. It has a start date, an end date, and a method. So let's see, our start date will make that the start date. The end date will make our date that we had in the rows. And for the method, it's either true or false. So since we're in the US, let's type in false, parenthesis, and hit enter. Copy this down. And it tells us the number of days between the start and end based on a 360-day calendar year. So as we're scrolling down through here, I get to 114 days. Let's try changing the date increment to, I don't know, let's try 90 days once. And you can see, you know, here it goes up to 355 days. I'm just trying to see what the date is. Here it is. Sunday, March 14th, 355 days on a 360-day year from today's date. So let's change this back to 4, and we're good with that. For the network days, equals net working days, the number of days between a couple. And there's also this international one. We don't need that. We're just going to type in network days. Start date is my start date, comma, the end date is here. And then if you have any holidays that you want to subtract out of this, we could put in a list of holidays. Say you want to pull out President's Day, Martin Luther King Day, Labor Day, Memorial Day, etc. We could set that up as a list and pull those out as well. So I'll just leave that off, hit enter, and there's one net working day. In other words, we've worked one day between the ending one, the 19th, and today. So we've got a 1. Let's copy this down. Between now and Monday, there's 3 working days. So Thursday, Friday, and then Monday. So that'd be 3. Next Friday, add 4 more days in there. On Tuesday, you see it's, you know, it skips the weekend, and that's why, you know, so basically it takes out anything that's a weekend, or if you have a list of holidays, you can do that. I'm going to widen out this column just a little bit more for the network days, networking days. All right. Okay, we've got workday. So let's type in W workday parenthesis. Kind of similar to the networking days. We've got the start date. Oh, hang on. Equals work day parenthesis. I've got my starting day, and then the number of days that I want to compute from that. So I'll put that here and use function F4 a couple of times. So we've got days listed here. And in fact, let's do this. Let's copy this, since I've already got this. Right justified. Let's put this to 1. And we need to format our date here as well. So let's put that in here. Copy this down. Guess I need to widen that out a little bit more. So 1 working day from Thursday is Friday. 1 working day from Monday. 1 working day from Friday the 27th is the next working day would be the following Monday. So that's how you can use that function. So if you change this around a little bit, you could put in 7 working days, or, you know, how many, think of it like how many shipping days you might have, for instance. So I'll set that back to a 1. All right, for my weekday, I've got the weekday, that's a serial number, so that's my kind of date. The return type, I've got a whole bunch of different options. I've got 1, 2, 3, and then I've got 11 through 17, depending on if you want number 1 to be Sunday, if you want number 1 to be Monday, if you want it to be 0 through 6, etc. So let's put in our return type up here. Function F4, so we always use that cell. And let's copy this over, and we called this the return type. Oops, wrong cell. Better undo that one. Put it up here. Copy this down. And it gives me a number 1 through 7 to tell you what day of the week that is. All right, for the week number, I'm going to grab the day. Again, use the return type. I've got some different options there. So let's reference this cell up here. Come on. Function F4 a couple of times, hit enter. I want to copy this return type for this one. Put that over here. We're already into week number 12 of the year. So let's copy that cell down. And we're good. Just to get the week number for each one of those dates. All right, we've just got a couple things left. I've got the year fraction, which actually I had the year fraction here from before, so we don't even need that column. Let's delete that one out. Right click on the column letter, hit delete. I've got my quarter and the quarter number. So there's a couple different ways we can get the quarter. You can use a VLOOKUP on your month, or the other thing that you can use is a trick where you can use take the round up function of my month divided by 3, and I want to use 0 decimal places. So the month 3 divided by 3 gives me 1. It rounds that up. It just says it's 1. I've got 4 divided by 3, which will give me 1.3, 1 1/3. So it rounds that up to a 2, which April is in quarter 2, and so on. Let's see. Hang on a second. I'm getting an error because something's not working. Oh, I know why. I need to be able to see my dates. So I hit Control Home. I'm going to turn off the freeze panes here. So let me go to View, Freeze Panes, Unfreeze Panes. Then I'll freeze panes and freeze panes, so that way it'll lock in that column as well. So let's take a look here. We've got May is in quarter 2. We've got June, which is still quarter 2, and then finally July is quarter 3. So it's working correctly. All right, so that's how you can compute out the quarter if you need to. Finally, what I can do is if I want to have Q or QTR for the quarter, you can use a concatenate function for that. So you could say equals the letter Q, or if you like, I'll put in QTR. And if you want a space in between it, you can put a space there. Then I'll do ampersand, round up, parenthesis, take my month, divided by 3, comma 0, hit enter, and I get quarter 1. Copy this down. Quarter 2, quarter 3, etc. So that's how you can join these things together. Just different little things you can try. So that's the date sheet. I think that's probably the worst one because there's so many different date functions that we had to go through on it. Sorry that it took us a half an hour just to churn through all that, but the rest of them will go a little bit faster, trust me. Some other things that you should do: adjust the column widths, clean some of that stuff up. So I'm going to highlight all my column widths here quickly. And let's try to double click between these to adjust that. You can take a look and see how wide it's going to print this out. Some of these columns you might actually want to keep it a little bit wider just to make it easier to read the numbers. So for instance, like all these dates, if you hold your control key and select a few of those columns, this one and this one, and then set them all kind of the same length. So I'm just going to click and drag here. We take this out to 120 pixels, widens them out a little bit better that way, and you can adjust some of those things as you like. So we'll save this and work on our time functions and the rest of the sheet shortly.